Yes, indeedy, folks. It's the Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. And now, let's check out a BFD. That's right, folks. It's a big, fun date. Folks, I'm shocked that you would think your beer drinking guide would take you where you thought that was going. Today's big fun date takes us to the puzzle box. And the puzzle box asks, what does this cannon this class and this number have to do with this coming Saturday, September the 13th at 1:30 in the afternoon? To find the answer to this puzzle box, let's look at this number. If we add this number to this number, we come up with 2008. And this number is on the cornerstone of the east wing of Boise High. The east wing was the first wing built in the current building, but the east wing was not the first high school in Boise. Actually, the first high school in Boise was the top floor of a four-story building that sat where the west wing of the Capitol building now sits. That building had its first graduating class in 1884, and they graduated 2 students. That building served the needs of the community for 18 years. In 1902, it became inadequate, and the school district built a new school made of red brick right where the central wing of the Boise High School now sits. However, that high school was so poorly built, several people on the board of the schools quit because they didn't want their name associated with it. It was made with plaster where it should have been made with cement. It had air intakes where it was picking up dust. It was designed by somebody from out of town, and the local architects got together and decided, you know, we can do better than this. Apparently, about the best part of that school was the dedication that Mayor Moses Alexander of Boise gave when they dedicated the cornerstone on June 5th, 1902. He said, "The building is dedicated as a temple of liberty, where the children of the rich and the poor meet on terms of equality, a symbol of a free country, a free government, and a free people." I know when I went to this school, I was going to school with the children of the richest people in Idaho. I was going to school with the children of the governor of Idaho. And, of course, I was going to school with a lot of kids like myself that had been raised on dirt streets from the wrong side of State Street. To this day, Boise High remains the most economically diverse school in the state. It has always had a high percentage of students accepted into prestigious schools, and in 2008, it has been recognized as being in the top 5% of high schools in the United States. But let's get back to the red brick schoolhouse that was built in 1902. Only 5 years after building this new high school that was so huge it would serve the city's needs forever, local architects Tortollet and Hummel, who are still in town, Hummel is still doing work around town. In fact, they were in on the remodeling of this school later on. They are now working with the Capitol building. Tortollet and Hummel also designed the state Capitol building. Here it was, 5 years after building this huge building, that Tortollet and Hummel came and they said to the city, this building is so bad that we should replace the whole darn thing, not even try to save it. At the time, there was a student body of 300 students, and Tortollet and Hummel were designing a building to be built with 2 wings and then tearing down the old building and building a central part that would have accommodations for 1,200 students. So here was an audacious little town in the backwater of a desert community out in the middle of Idaho that decided to tear down a 5-year-old building and replace it with a structure that was 4 times larger than their needs. Now that's a little frontier town with some spunk. Back in 1908, it was difficult to keep boys in school, just as it is today. That's always been a problem in education. And especially back then, when the boys were needed as labor on their parents' farms. Just as today, there was a great debate about you should just tell kids to sit down and behave themselves and educate them. And the other side of the debate was, no, you make school interesting and you make learning interesting and fun, and then you keep students around. The school board was in agreement with the second part of that debate, and so they decided the first part of their new school that they would build would be the East Wing. This East Wing was dedicated to, quote, the work of that character which is generally taken up by boys. Eventually, the state's first radio station would be broadcast from this building. But one innovative design that they came up with in building this East Wing for the work taken up by boys is they decided to put in a gymnasium. It was put in an extra deep basement on the north of the building, what we would call the back of the building. It had a gymnasium floor with a U-shaped stadium seating around it. The seating was up in a balcony. I have read reports that they played baseball in there. I don't really know how. Maybe it was with a wiffle ball. I don't know. But they apparently played a lot of games in that gymnasium. And it worked. The first year after building the East Wing, the city grew by 15%, and the number of boys staying in high school grew by 100%. When a new gymnasium was built in the 1930s, this room became the ROTC room. It was used for ROTC training until the 1970s, and part of their training was they had a rifle range for practicing inside the school. They used 22 rifles to practice, and their aim was not always as good as it could have been, as is witnessed to this day by beams overhead in the basement. I don't know if on your TV you can make it out, but this beam is absolutely riddled with the marks of bullets. I can just imagine, in today's world, having kids shooting rifles in the basement of a high school. Today, this large room in the basement of the East Wing is the music library for the school district. 4 years after laying the cornerstone for the East Wing, in 1912, they laid the cornerstone for the West Wing. The West Wing of the school is a mirror image of the East Wing. However, the West Wing was dedicated to, quote, domestic science and those portions of manual training that are usually taken up by girls. In the same portion of the building as the East Wing's very unique gymnasium, they built something brand new for schools in the West Wing of the building. This large space in the basement of the West Wing of the building was, quote, commodious and especially well equipped, a domestic science department with a large lunchroom attached. That's right, folks. Today we take lunchrooms for granted in schools, but that was not always the case. The idea of a lunchroom in a school was unique and radical when they built this school. However, it served 2 purposes. For one thing, Boise High School was a local campus that served the entire area. There were students that traveled to this school on the trolley system from the entire region. For these students to be able to get lunch without having to return home or having to carry things to school that might spoil was a very, very good concept for making it so that students could stay in school. The second advantage of having the cafeteria is that it helped offset the costs of buying the food for people to practice with when they were learning to cook. This cafeteria served the needs of the students and the faculty from 1912 until 1998. Since 1998, this large room has served the art department. By the time they were ready to tear down the old school and replace it with the central wing of the building, it was getting to where there were so many students that they couldn't afford to lose the classroom. So the school district decided to build a new building that eventually would house manual arts. At the time, the industrial world was needing many new skills. For instance, automobiles no longer needed apprentices for blacksmiths. New technologies in woodworking, printing, construction, electricity, pretty well everything that was going on needed new skills. By the time the manual arts building was built, it was called the Industrial Arts Building, and we always fondly knew it as the IA. This structure was built across 10th Street, so it expanded the campus to the east. The classrooms in the IA building were used while the red brick building was demolished and replaced by the central wing of the current building. And it allowed a 1921 Statesman article to observe, "When finished, Boise will have one of the largest as well as the most completely equipped secondary schools in the Northwest. Already, the Industrial Arts Building has made possible the addition of many vocational courses, ranging from printing to costume design, not usually found in an average high school." The Industrial Arts Building was built in 1919, and in the summer of 1921, they tore down the old original red brick building and built the central wing of Boise High. Besides classrooms, this wing held the administrative offices and a large auditorium that sat 1,800 people. Extra care had been taken to make sure that the heating system was silent, and this auditorium served the city's needs as a major auditorium until the building of the Morrison Center. These two structures served the high school needs of the community for 15 years. In 1936, the campus expanded further to the east over to 9th Street and to the south across Washington Street. A large new gymnasium was built, and the old gymnasium in the East Wing was turned over to ROTC. It was, of course, in the middle of the Depression. This project was funded partially by the Works Project Administration from the federal government. They provided the labor. As with all WPA projects, the building is very substantial, and because they hired artists, it is also very interesting to look at. And it served not only the school's needs, but the city's needs for a gymnasium until Boise Junior College built a larger gymnasium across the river. In 1957, a new building was built to the west of the gymnasium. This served the music department and had large rehearsal halls for choir, band, and orchestra. The district was careful to mimic the distinctive style of the gymnasium. For 58 years, the downtown campus had had no sports field. They would play on different community fields around town. These fields were being used up by junior high schools and other facilities around the town. So in 1960, the city condemned and tore down the 2 blocks to the west of the building and built Boise High's sports field. That's right, folks. Every grade school, every junior high school in town had a sports field. Yet this school, that had been one of the first schools in the nation to include a gymnasium inside the building, did not have a sports field until 1960. By the 1990s, there were many people saying we should close this campus, partly because of the older buildings, and partly because there was just no place to park. However, busing students to suburban schools loses an identity for cities. With 2,000 students in the buildings, the school was completely overcrowded, and so it was decided instead of expanding this campus to where it could handle the 2,000 students, they would build Timberline High School in East Boise and divide the student body between those two schools. Part of that expansion was to completely remodel and refurbish the old building that was built in 1908, 1912, and 1921, and to build the Frank Church building. Frank Church had graduated from Boise High. This building replaced the Industrial Arts building and the Mormon church that was between the Industrial Arts building and 9th Street. The Frank Church building houses state-of-the-art science labs. It features the campus's third gymnasium. The first one, of course, was in the East Wing and is no longer being used as a gymnasium. The 1930s gymnasium is still used for sports, and the gymnasium in this building is a modern facility that houses games. Behind the pillars there in the rounded corner is a modern library with modern communication. And just underneath where the Brave there is a cafeteria that is not in the basement. It's airy and bright, and very often there is outdoor cooking on the patio between the main building and this building. There are many, many fascinating, fun, and outrageous stories about this building and keeping it working for students and staff. In the future, we'll probably look into some of those stories, including these 5 huge boilers that kept 3 men working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all through the heating season. A new supervisor once decided that he could save some money by sending the crew home because it was a vacation. The students thoroughly enjoyed the extra 2 days of vacation while the building was brought back up to temperature. The boilers had to be fed coal, which kept 2 men busy. A third man was kept busy making sure the high-pressure 120-pound steam did not blow up the building. Indeed, the high-pressure steam from these boilers was what was used to heat the entire Boise High campus. Coal was shoveled into these boilers from 1912, when they were built during the construction of the West Wing, until 1972. That's 60 years. In 1972, 2 of the boilers were converted to gas and continued to heat the building until 1983. In 1912, the district was aware of burning this much coal. Special hoppers were put on that would burn the coal clean, and an extra high chimney was built to distribute the soot away from the neighborhood. In 1979, some boys were celebrating their graduation from the school. They climbed the chimney, and one of them fell to his death down this chimney. The chimney is filled with crossbars for reinforcement. He bounced off of those crossbars to the bottom, and he fell face first into the soot. An autopsy revealed that he was alive when he hit the bottom of the chimney, although probably unconscious. What actually killed him was suffocating in the soot at the bottom of this chimney. It was, to say the least, one of the great tragedies of the school. This large blower fan, standing 12 feet high, distributed fresh air throughout the entire large white brick building. All of the air in every classroom was changed 8 times every hour. This blower ran from 1912 until 1969, a period of 57 years, keeping this building comfortable. In 1983, the boilers at Boise High fell silent. A pipe was laid to the city geothermal system, and this small heat exchanger replaced the huge building-size boilers. A small tweak to how this water was delivered made it so that one day the city called up the school and asked if they had gone back to heating the school with natural gas. The people at the school assured them no, they wouldn't do that, and they asked why. Well, the city geothermal department said, "You are heating that entire building with 100 gallons of geothermal water a day." We thought that was a leak in the system. And folks, I'd love to tell you the story about how that tweaking got done, as well as a lot of the other fascinating stories about this historic century-old building. However, we've got a show to finish up. So, in our puzzle, we have found that this number had to do with the centennial of this building. But what, I hear you ask, does that have to do with this cannon? This cannon sat on the State House lawn for years, pointing across Jefferson Street to this, the Federal Building. This fella here was going to Boise High in the 1940s, and one day he and his buddies decided it would be great fun to shove some gunpowder in this cannon, fill it full of bottle caps, and see what happens when it goes off. It did not shake the foundations of the Federal buildings, but there were a lot of replaced windows. You'll notice the cannon is plugged up with cement, and now you know why. Even David's obituary notes it was one of the highlights of his life. To this day, his classmates point out that everyone in school knew David and his buddies did it, but somehow the administration and the police department never figured it out. An interesting part of that story is David was the son of the chief of police. Which brings us to the third part of the puzzle, and that is this class. That's right, folks. The class that David graduated with was the class of 1948. These great fun folks are having their reunion this year. In fact, they're having it this weekend. On Saturday, they are going to be touring the campus at Boise High to celebrate the centennial of this building, to celebrate the history of this school, and to celebrate their 60th reunion. The class of 1948 is inviting all interested parties, whether you went to Boise High or not, whether you just moved to town or if you were born here. Anyone who would like to come and tour the building with them is welcome as their guest. In addition to touring the building, there will be a slideshow. For all you whippersnappers under 40 or so, a slideshow is what you now call a PowerPoint presentation. The great-great-grandson of the man who sold his farmland so that they could build Boise High where it is built has written a book about building Boise High and heating it. His slideshow will include lots of historic photographs that I do not have access to on this program, and it will include photographs that he took in basements, sub-basements, and third sub-basements of this building. The class of 1948 would love to have you come by and join their celebration of their school. This centennial tour of Boise High is this Saturday, September 13th at 1:30 in the afternoon. The slideshow presentation will begin at 1:30 in the cafeteria, the new bright cafeteria that is in the Frank Church building right underneath the sign of the Brave. It is a great opportunity to see this amazing campus that holds so much history for the city and for education. And the class of 1948 hopes to see you there. And now, your beer drinking guide has big news. An all new service from the beer drinker himself. The Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo is now available 24/7 on your computer. Yes, folks, I've gotten all the previous shows uploaded to the internet. In the future, I will try to make it so that every show is available the day after it is aired. You can check them out anytime by going to Google Videos and looking for Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Or you can check them out at my website, www.greatwahoo21.com. Click on the list of shows and then click on the red letters that say Watch Show next to whatever show you want from the list. The Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Available 24/7. Can it get any sweeter than that? A guy walked into a bar one day and he ran into the family dermatologist. The doctor asked him, "Say, did that Mudpack that I gave your wife help out her appearance?" The guy replied, "Well, it sure did, but it keeps falling off." And that's this week's Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week when we'll be celebrating the autumn equinox. Don't forget to check out the class of 1948's Boise High Centennial Tour this Saturday, September the 13th at 1:30. And, as always, keep celebrating the Great Wahoo.